so much of the trauma healing work is like being able to be with like really hard, challenging feelings. Like so much grief came up for me, like grieving the loss of so much of my youth and my health and my relationships, also to myself, and in being dependent on alcohol, and grieving just like what my younger self went through in those really dark moments. All right, hey everyone, welcome back to the Souls Work Podcast, the show about uncovering our authentic selves through doing both the light work and the shadow work. I'm your host, Janice Ho, and I am here with my beautiful friend, classmate, Janna Estrada. How are you, Janna? Welcome.
I'm good. Thanks for having me. This is so much fun.
I'm so excited. And this is the first episode in this new series I'm doing on my podcast called My Process Series. So it's really about me just sharing some of my personal processing around certain topics. Like I'm going to talk about in the future moving from more anxious attachment to secure, talking about my process around grieving, relationship loss. Today we're talking about my process going alcohol free. And yes, thank you. I was originally going to do all of these solo, but as I told you, like I didn't want to do this one alone. It felt more supportive to have somebody chatting with me about it, and so that's why I asked you. And so thank you for being here with me for this,
Of
like,
course. It's such an
this.
honor. The fact that you chose me to like be part of this process. So
Well, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more for our guests so they know who you are, whatever you like them to know?
sure. What do I want them to know? So my name is Janna. I am 28, I think. I don't remember. Um,
I love that.
um, I met Janice through our psychotherapy program.
Yeah.
Um, I am also a founder of a baking business called Janna
Mm,
Bakes.
so good. Best
And
cakes.
yeah, and I'm just trying to freaking live my life and figure it out and just live the life that I want. So that's
Mm,
me. Yeah.
yes. And we're going to have Jenna on as a guest talking about her process, her life, her coming into her authenticity, and all of the good things. So cannot wait for that. And go follow her at
Janna Bakes.
Janna Bakes. I tell you, those strawberry shortcakes. And you can follow me at Janice O Images, at Janice O Counseling as well on Instagram. All right. Oh, and we are on YouTube at the Souls Work Podcast. If you're not already here, come join us, watch us in action. Why not?
Mm.
Um, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. All right. Okay, so this is a big kind of moment for me because it is my 3-year alcohol-free anniversary on Wednesday, which will be April the 12th. I don't even know what day it is today, but yeah, and I'm not gonna get into my whole history of like my alcohol dependency story and all that because I've podcasted about it before. You can go check it out in season 1, my drinking story, season 2, the intro, and then there's a episode called Why is it so hard to stop drinking, or something like that. And I share a lot more about my background there. This episode is really to pick up from where I left off, which is like, how did I end up actually stopping drinking? Am I making grammatical sense?
How did I stop the drinking?
Drinking, yes, thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna chat today about 5 big things that really helped me in that process. And Jen is gonna just help guide the conversation, keep me on track, ask questions, and just be like the amazing moral support that she is. But before we dive into that, Janna, I was wondering if I could maybe ask you what has been sort of your general experience, maybe with drinking culture, growing up in the city. We're both in Toronto, and just like having these kind of conversations or lack thereof. Because I know for me, I was very much immersed in a drinking and drug culture as well, growing up in the city with certain groups of friends. And there was no conversation about any of this. So, yeah, what about you?
So I grew up in the restaurant industry. So that has a
Mm.
very drink like it was a habit for us to like, have a hard day at work and then we all come together and we all drink. So that was very like I was very immersed in that as well. So
Mm.
growing up like I think maybe when I was like 20, 21,
Mm,
it became like a habit. Or like I
mm,
remember when my friend, like we would go out every weekend and we would drink, and like that was like a big part
yeah.
of like how I socialized, how I felt comfortable socializing. Like I felt like I needed to drink to really get into the moment. And
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't really talked about because like in university and stuff, it's that was like around the time of university. It's also such the culture in school where like, you
Totally.
socialize, like first year is all about socializing, and then everybody's drinking at the
Mm-hmm.
parties and the keg parties and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was such a I don't even know how I how people do it,
Yeah.
how we did it all the time. Like
I know.
it's and do we talk
Yeah.
about it? No, not really. No.
No,
It's
it was
kind of
so
just the norm.
normalized.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
normalized.
absolutely.
And like you
Yeah.
just feel the effects after.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
like everybody who drinks and, maybe even does it sometimes for like the quote unquote wrong reasons, whatever that means to them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have like an addiction or a dependency, right?
Yeah.
I think, but it is so normalized and you're kind of seeing everyone do it that if you are the one who maybe kind of knows that there is like a problem, like there's something a little bit deeper there with your drinking as I felt. It was a hard though to really name that or to kind of see that for what it was because everybody else seemed to be doing it too. And I just felt
Mhm.
very like kind of I think there's something wrong with me maybe because I can't seem to keep my shit together or I can't, I'm falling down all over the place or having blackouts or acting like in a certain way. So it was just
Mm.
hard to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a very slippery slope too. Like if
Yeah.
you're in that environment,
Totally.
yeah, super slippery slope. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I want to make sure to talk about a couple disclaimers before we dive in that are really, really important. So, number one is that this is absolutely my one unique personal story with alcohol dependency and going alcohol free. Like, the things that I'm going to talk about are definitely not a to do list, like, do this and you will go alcohol free too. Like, not at all. Like, some of it might resonate, some of it might not. Some people might need more things to support them if that's something they want to take on. So I really, really just want to emphasize that. And the second thing is that I'm going to talk about the five big things that helped me more in the immediate term of going alcohol free, which I started that journey 3 years ago in April 2020. But there was so many things leading up to that moment that built up over time, over many years, that I feel allowed for those things to be more effective at the time that they happen. Things like having more housing stability and financial stability and moving away from a huge peer group that was immersed in that culture and all of the other things that I was going through. So I really, really just want to make sure people understand that there's a whole layer of history and complexity there in terms of what really ultimately helped me to shift. But we're going to just keep this focused and talk about the five big things that helped me to go alcohol free starting in April 2020.
Okay. Okay, Janice. Let me
Yes.
guide you now.
Take over, Jenna.
So, tell me, what are the five things? Tell me what are the
Mm.
five things?
All right, just list them off kind of. Okay.
Yeah, and
So,
then we'll
number
dive
one,
deeper. Yeah.
absolutely. So, number one was learning about the neuroscience of alcohol addiction. What is actually going on internally in my brain and
Hmm.
my body. Number
Yeah.
two was taking a course called the Naked Mind Intensive course. And really, what was supportive about that was it wasn't an abstinence based approach. I was not going into this being like, I'm never going to drink again, but it was a really deep unlearning, examination, interrogation of my beliefs that I had developed around alcohol, and unlearning that. Number three was turning to community in really hard moments. Number four was doing the trauma healing work. And number five was being in what I called a controlled environment, which was really about removing triggers to drinking. Yeah.
Okay. I have some questions because,
Yes.
okay, so we'll start with the neuroscience because I think that's very important. Like
Yeah.
learning about what's happening in your body. It's awareness. Like it's good to know. So like tell me like
Yes.
how did you get like
Mm.
how did you dive like how did you dive into that? Was that just like a random
Mm-hmm.
search or like
Well, so I used to work in the criminal justice field in my first career, and there was a lot of issues around like drug addiction and stuff like that at that time. So I was already interested in that. I had already started learning about, why do
mm,
people get addicted to something like cocaine? And I would read about the science behind it. And so now I was just shifting more into like what specifically is going on with alcohol.
mhm,
And so I would just Google it, look it up. I the whole podcast episode on why is it so hard to stop drinking was all about that. So if anyone is interested in knowing like what is actually happening in, like on a what would you call like a neurobiological level, like what is that actual process of building tolerance, going through the withdrawal and the cravings, like what is actually happening in my brain with the chemicals. I was really doing a deep dive into that. And the thing about it that I think is so helpful is that it really demystifies something that seems
mm,
so illogical on the surface. It's like you're doing these behaviors and you know that you want to stop, something is problematic, but you feel like you can't. And then learning
mm.
why you desire alcohol so much and learning why it's so hard to stop, I think just removes this layer of demystification, confusion, and shame as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say because like I can see it being a I'm the problem. Like I
Yeah.
just can't stop, but there is
Yeah.
actually science behind why it's addictive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can
Absolutely.
see
And
it
I think
taking away the shame. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that relates to trauma psychoeducation as well. Like learning what's
Hmm.
happening within us when we're going through trauma responses that we're like, fuck, like I want to stop doing this certain pattern in my relationships or whatever, but I just keep getting triggered and doing the same thing over and over again. And when we learn what's actually going on in our bodies and why something so irrational actually makes a lot of sense, I think that it does remove a lot of that shame and gives us the awareness of like, okay, that is the first step. And then it's like, what do we do about it? And then going a little
Yeah.
bit deeper. But that is, I think, part of the process.
It's kind of like reminding me of like naming it. Like when you
Yeah.
name it, then you can
Mm,
actually start something and do something about it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Nice. I'm I don't know if I'm curious also. Can like in
Yeah.
this long story short,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
is happening in the brain when it comes to addiction? Like is
Oh.
there
Mm.
like a short form that like you can tell me so that I can understand?
I don't know that I can do a short form, but let me just talk about one maybe aspect, and as it relates to what I'm talking about with my process, which is
Mhm.
that when I'm going through withdrawal, um, it's almost like my body is trying to counterbalance the effects of alcohol. So, when I'm drinking, I'm getting all the euphoric effects of it and I feel great. But the kind of state that my brain is going through in that moment with all of this flood
Mhm.
of like the substance that is not normal for my body, right? Now my homeostasis, quote unquote, like the scientific term, is thrown out of whack, and my body is always going to respond by trying to bring me back to balance. And that is what is essentially happening when I'm going through that withdrawal. And now I'm feeling the opposite effects. I'm feeling like shit. I'm feeling really like depressed, and my mind has learned, my body has learned that the thing that I need in that moment is alcohol to make me feel better, quote unquote, better again. But when I
Yeah.
understand what's happening, that, it is my body coming back into homeostasis, this is the process, whatever. In that moment, I have a different lens that I can look through, in terms of like interpreting my state. Before, it would have just felt shitty, and I would have just really had this overarching belief that I must drink in order to be okay. And now it can shift to something a little bit more nuanced, something a little bit more like, oh, actually, alcohol is not going to be my savior right now. In fact, it is alcohol that is making me feel this way. And that if I drink again, I'm going to just go through the same cycle. So it just starts to like broaden that, um, perspective a bit.
Amazing. Awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness. So the second point that you said, the Naked
Mm-hmm.
Mind intensive course. And then when you said abstinence, I'm like, wait, what? I've never heard of this course. So what, tell me what is it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, what I meant by abstinence first off is that a lot of times when people are trying to like overcome an addiction, let's say, they will try to just stop the behavior altogether, right? And so that's the
Mm,
approach. It's an abstinence based approach. I mean, you maybe heard about like sex abstinence, like don't have any sex. It's really just like do not do the behavior at all, period. And um, programs like AA, for example, kind of take more of that approach. And for me, the number of times I said in my life, like, I'm going to stop drinking, I can't even count. And I failed every time. And I knew that for me, where I was at in that moment, for some people, they will say that's what they need. And that's cool. Again, personal journey. But for me, I knew it wasn't going to work. I knew if I was like
mm,
so like all or nothing, I would just be like, fuck it. No, like this is impossible anyway. There's no way I'm even going to get to 1 year alcohol free. So if I make it so strict, like I'm just not even going to bother trying. So I took this course because this person, Annie Grace, who facilitates it, doesn't take that abstinence based approach. It's very
mm.
much of an exploration of like, what is your relationship with alcohol and starting to unlearn some of those really deeply ingrained beliefs. And that is the approach that I wanted to take.
Oh, yeah, I'm hearing also awareness as well. Yeah, that just bringing the awareness of it. I love that method because I relate so well to like cutting cold turkey and it just not
Mm,
working. But this
yeah.
feels more of like a deeper
Yeah.
learning of yourself as well. So
Yeah.
that's really
For
nice.
sure.
Oh.
And so I think maybe it would be helpful though to share a bit about where I was actually at that time. I have this notebook where I was like writing notes from the course and then I would do these little check-ins. And at the beginning of the course, it asked, what is your relationship with alcohol? Can you really take it or leave it? And I wrote no. I was like, I still get cravings for alcohol when I'm triggered by certain cues, watching other people drink, including in TV shows when I'm feeling anxious, sad, lonely, bored, seeing or smelling it in front of me, etc. It's not at every instance of these things, but it
Hmm.
happens often enough and it's still intense enough that I feel I'm still under the control of alcohol. I feel like I can't live my whole life without it. That sounds both impossible and extremely undesirable. So I still felt um yeah, under the control of it. I felt I would be very deprived if I didn't get to drink. And I felt like I needed alcohol to get me through certain social situations, like being in big groups or meeting a new guy. And I felt
Yeah.
like alcohol was like my friend and my companion.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. So it
see.
was still there. It was still pretty, yeah. So the course was amazing because I really it made you really like examine what are your beliefs around alcohol, like, oh,
Hmm.
alcohol tastes so good, or it makes me feel this particular way, it helps me to be more free in these situations. And then it's almost like we did an excavating of all these very common beliefs of well, actually, regarding the taste of alcohol, like what was it actually like when you had your first drink? And when I really thought about it, I was like, it tasted like fucking shit. Like, and talking about how it's kind of like poison for your body. And the more that I really thought about it and learned about why is it that we start associating like alcohol as having like this really great taste, I was like, oh shit, like it's not necessarily objectively that alcohol actually tastes good. And what that led me to is that even now I have had moments where I'm like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to taste alcohol again. And I have this like maybe image of like, oh, it would be such a nice experience. And then almost immediately after, I think, oh, but I wouldn't actually like the taste. It would have that almost poison taste for me afterwards. So it was
Mm.
quite a unlearning that happened.
That's a good method. Yeah. The third one is being in a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I started this alcohol free journey at the beginning of the pandemic, which I know for some people the pandemic made it harder. And none of this is to say like I wish the pandemic on us again. I do not. I think it was shit. But however, an outcome of that was because I was in what I felt was a bit more of a controlled environment where I was always at home in my little condo box, not having access to the outside world, going to bars, going to restaurants, hanging out with friends, where I knew if I did that, I would absolutely be triggered into wanting to drink. And I would
Yeah.
not have had that sort of space and opportunity to remove such huge triggers in my life. And so there was something about that, given that I was taking a very intentional journey into examining my relationship with alcohol, that created the conditions for me that I think actually helped. So, and then, really the idea of that is removing certain triggers that I know are going to like activate me. And um, that also included like not watching certain TV shows where the people are always drinking red wine and scotch, which were my two favorite drinks that, when I drank.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always glamorized. And it's always like, these characters doing that like every other scene. And that would always make me want to pour a glass for myself. Yeah.
It's quite interesting because I'm reading Atomic Habits right now. And like
Mm,
one of the methods is you change your environment rather than
mm.
mustering up all the energy for self-control. You
Yeah,
just
yeah.
you set yourself up to succeed, and like that sounds
Mhm.
like that's what you did, and it helped immensely. So
Yeah.
that's a really good method as well. Or it was right timing,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also started noticing, especially during the pandemic, that there were a lot of ads popping up even on my social media feed of like, "Oh, like
Oh.
deliver wine at home, like we got you," kind of thing, right? And I started to like whatever settings where you say like I don't like this ad or whatever, that's what I started doing, and just trying to distance myself as much as possible from even images of drinking. And then like when you're on this journey, you're like, holy shit, it's like everywhere. Like it's so normalized even in news articles, right? Like this cocktail recipe, or like here are the health benefits of wine. And so yeah, it can take a lot, and I can understand why it's very difficult for people to stop drinking
Yeah.
because the triggers are all around us.
Yeah, when you were talking about TV, the
Mm.
culture is very strong on TV. Like I don't know why I just thought of Cougar Town and it's like normal for them to like drink big glasses of wine and stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, it actually is.
absolutely.
Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
So the fourth one is turning to a community for support in hard times.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So the course, the Snake in Mind Intensive, there was an online community sort of associated with that.
Hmm.
And they were a really big source of support for me in moments where I was just like literally felt like I was not losing my mind, but it was pretty rough. There was a check-in that I wrote in here where I said, "Holy fuck, I am full out sobbing and gasping for air and feeling so much grief and sadness. I was feeling so down earlier when grocery shopping, felt like life was so gray and meaningless. I walked around the aisles and felt anxious and depressed. And so, like, those were some of the feelings and sensations and emotions that I would go through at times where, um, also like pandemic and like so much shit happening at the time, and I didn't have the one thing that I would normally go to like cope with all of that anymore. So it's like I really had to feel into like all of the shit. And
Mm.
um so there were times where I would message on like this online forum and have people respond with the most like supportive messages, and it really made a difference that like these people knew what I was going through because they were going through it themselves, right? I mean, everyone was at different places in their journey, but they all remembered what the fuck that was like, and you didn't have to explain all about, you know, what my situation was and like why and the reasons, because like everybody knew and there was a comfort in that. But I also want to say that I feel really alone even though I have this virtual community of people who understand, because it was still new. They weren't really my people. They weren't people in my life who I could like pick up the phone and call and talk to, or that kind of thing. But I actually felt at the time that people that I knew wouldn't really understand, that they might try to like fix me, that they might not really take it seriously. I think as well, a lot of people like to drink, of course, right? And so it can actually be activating for people to hear about someone going alcohol free, and what does that mean for their drinking, right? And that's their
Mhm.
shit, but it also means that for me, as someone who's trying to maybe reach out and just have a supportive ear, that I may not get the kind of response that is really going to help me in that moment. So I sort of almost started blocking everybody out in that sense, like feeling like I couldn't turn to people in that way, and that was hard. And so I wrote at the end of this journal entry, maybe I'll record my own podcast that I may or may not ever release, so I can feel like I'm talking to someone about it. And that is the reason I started podcasting again in season 2, because I felt like I just needed to actually verbalize it and say, this is how I'm feeling.
Oh.
What does that bring up for you, Janna?
Like I feel so much for you, like hearing the words that you were thinking when you were just walking through the grocery aisle, and like it hits really hard because I can remember times in my life where I've thought that as well, and I've felt very alone, like I couldn't turn to people, like call up people.
Yeah.
And it's really nice that you had that forum, right? It was a forum where you
Yeah.
could talk to people who had that experience. Because did you feel like it really brought you, when you would talk to them, it brought you down to your body and
Mm.
away from the thoughts and
Yeah.
mhm,
That's a
around
good
it?
question. I don't know that I was as in touch with my body in that way, the way that we're really learning now in our program, and that I've
Mhm,
been practicing more in the last, like, I would really say couple years. But I do think what it helped with was, I definitely felt a lot of emotions. I've always been a very highly emotional feeling person. And so um, sometimes when I'm in those intense feelings and sensations, it can feel very difficult for me to sort of contain them in a safe way, for me to feel them and be like, okay, I'm going to be okay. And that's why that is a huge reason why I started drinking, because it felt like alcohol would numb that intensity. And
mm,
so in these moments when I was feeling all the things that I was reading about, I think hearing from other people that support, that understanding, and words of encouragement just helped to kind of bring down that intensity of those feelings. And in that way, for sure, if I think back to it, there was like that sort of like grounding in my body that happened.
that's good. Do you also feel like being able to talk to people who have experienced it and also who have been able to
Mm,
successful, not really successfully, but like
mm.
they have gotten
Yeah.
out of it, did that also help
Yeah.
you, inspire you that it is possible to get over
Absolutely.
this? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, everybody was in different places in their journey, and some people were alcohol free for many, many years, but they were still on the forum, and so hearing from them for sure gave me that hope. And then there were people who were like literally on day 1 of going alcohol free, or maybe had like quote unquote failed like many times and were starting again, and like even if I was in the month 1, I still felt a little bit like it wasn't even about feeling further along. It was just like hearing them share about how they felt and being like, "Oh fuck, I was there too," and I get that. And also like I'm on month 1 of being alcohol free, and so there was a hope in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
All different angles, like support in all different angles. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
But I think like when I think about this, and if someone's listening and like has someone in their life who is going through something like this, there really is so much shame already that like, that I was definitely feeling, because you are just like, why can't I just stop? And you feel very broken and like deficient and all of these things. So it can be very, very difficult when you're trying to turn to someone and you're feeling that there is like just more shame and judgment and
Mm-hmm.
trying to fix you and all of that, without this deeper understanding or maybe support or compassion. And it's not to say to stay in a relationship or dynamic where you're being harmed, because I know that it can definitely harm people who are in relationship with those who have an addiction. So I'm not saying that, but I think that just in general, our culture kind of, could probably learn a few lessons in maybe holding space for people who are going through things like this, because it is very, very difficult, and there's a lot of shame and stigma around it already.
Yeah, holding space is the thing that really sticks out because I think holding space is really hard,
I know it
really hard to
is.
do. But yeah, I think it's very
Yeah.
beneficial for people to learn that.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Thanks. All right.
So last one, doing the
Yeah.
trauma healing work. That is a that's a big one.
That's a huge one, a huge one. And there was like already so much, like I said, leading up to, when I actually started this specific alcohol free journey, of doing a lot of trauma healing work already, that I think helped me to just continue doing that. And, so much of the trauma healing work is like being able to be with like really hard, challenging feelings. Like so much grief came up for me, like grieving the loss of so much of my youth and my health and my relationships, also to myself, and in being dependent on alcohol, and grieving just like what my younger self went through in those really dark moments, and all of the things that led up to why I even drank in the first place. And a lot of people who are addicted to substances do have histories of trauma, and that is often a big reason why I think people get into drinking, because it is a creative adjustment, as we learn in Gestalt, right? Or a
Hmm.
protective adaptation to trauma. To, as I was sharing in my experience, was to cope with really, really intense, painful feelings that we don't have the support otherwise to deal with. And so this may be a creative adjustment, a way to sort of like do the best we can in that impossible situation, because our body is always trying to do whatever it can to come down from when things are being activated, everything feels overwhelming, and we will reach for whatever the fuck we can in that moment to
Hmm.
come down to that balance. It's just sometimes we maybe don't have the guidance or support or know how that this is not going to be the thing that is helpful really in the long run, and it's actually harmful in the long run. So I think really working through a lot of the deepest underlying things into the reasons why I was continuing to drink, what that was sort of protecting for me, and doing that ongoing trauma work was like absolutely foundational.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Question. So
Hmm.
all of these points, was this like your step by step? Like you started learning about
Hmm.
neuroscience and then you took the program and then you
Right.
control, like was it like that, or was it like kind of like all mixed up?
I would
And
say it was all mixed up.
okay.
Yeah. And I think certain aspects of it did already start happening before, like the neuroscience education. I was kind of already into that. And then I started taking the course like a month in, because I think I needed that extra support. I was really like, that course cost, I think, over $700. And I never spent that much on an online course. But I was like, shit, I think if this shit is going to happen, it's going to happen now. And I
Hmm.
thought about how much money I spend on drinking. So, so
Compared.
then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely, I think things that sort of like helped each other in a way. They built on top of each other, doing
Hmm.
one, doing the other, and then it all kind of like just sort of helped and snowballed. And then a few months in, I was like, holy shit, like I got to whatever it was, 3 months, 4 months. And I had learned at that point that it takes 6 to 12 months to detox, right? And really like kind of get your body in sort of like quote unquote a normalized state, like whatever that means. But
Hmm.
um at the beginning, I absolutely did not think I could get to a year. That sounded absolutely impossible, and like I said, very undesirable. But once I got in a few months in, I was like, okay, I think I can make it to 6 months, and I think I want to give myself that chance, because if it actually takes this long to detox, well, if I start drinking somewhere before that time, then I'm just going to easily get back into the cycle again. So as I was getting more encouraged and to doing these steps and all the iterations of it, I felt more and more resourced, and felt like it was possible to go a little bit further. And then once I made it to a year, I was like, I had lost the craving by then for
Mm.
drinking, and I knew that I could easily keep going. And now that I'm at 3 years almost, I definitely feel like it's possible to just like never drink again. I think sometimes I have those moments where, like I said, I think about it sometimes and I'm like, well, I'm in such a good place in my life now. Like, could I just have the one just to be like social or to enjoy it? And then there's this part of me that's like, you know what? I don't know. Like, I don't actually know if I would maybe get that impulse again. And for me, I'm good with not testing myself. Like, I don't feel I have anything to prove with it. I don't, even if there's a fear involved of like, oh shit, am I going to get addicted again? Like, I'm good with being with that fear and just not doing it because I take addiction very seriously. And I don't think it's something that I need to feel like I can beat in that way. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
really respect in a way, like just the ways that our body adapts in such incredible ways, even though it was very harmful. But I'm good with just continuing on this journey, and I'm loving being able to feel all the things and to be totally lucid and remember what the fuck happens when I hang out with people, or like, yeah.
Janice,
What's up,
what a
Janna?
big milestone. 3
Mm,
years.
thank you.
I am so proud of
Yeah.
you because that is
Thank
not
you.
easy.
No.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you for reflecting with me on this journey. Like,
Now we're gonna
sometimes
cry.
I, yeah, sometimes I forget how big it is because this is my norm, is to not drink.
Mm-hmm.
But so reflecting on it has been really interesting and has brought up some things for me, but also reminded me of like, yeah, how far I've come and what is possible in life, you know?
Yeah, anything is
Mm.
possible. Put the cheesy lines in.
Well, thank you again, Janna. I hope you had fun. I hope you'll come back and do more of these with me. And I can't wait to
Yeah.
have our conversation about you and your journey because it's been amazing. And I love just even seeing you grow in the program these past few months. So thank you again, Janna. And yeah, everyone go follow Janna at Janna Thinks. Amazing stuff.
Subscribe, like, comment, please, to
There you
Janice's
go.
YouTube page.
Okay, thank you for joining us, everyone. Until next time, bye.